What's up, y'all? Hey, welcome back to the show, Marks of a Man podcast, a production of Men Build Men. Today, we've got our good buddy, Daniel Rojas, in the studio with us today. Welcome.
Thank you very much, brother. It's an honor for me to be here.
Right on. So, Daniel is from Costa Rica, and he's the director of a ministry called Last Door Ministries. Yes. He's here in the States trying to do some fundraising. We definitely want from the outset give you guys, the listeners or the viewers, an opportunity to connect with him. So, Daniel, where can the listener or the viewers find more information about Last Door Ministries?
If you go to thelastdoor.org, you'll find in our website all the information that you need there.
Lastdoor.org.
Yes.
In the singular. Lastdoor.org. And so he is directing an organization, and the organization has an extended family of 115 children. Mm-hmm. He's here in the States doing some fundraising. It is critical. I would implore you guys to maybe check out their organization. They do need some support. We're going to get into it. And I would say this from the outset, man, like this is going to be a more mature interview. And if you are a parent, we're going to cover some things that your children may or may not want to hear. But, you know, just as a disclaimer up front, Daniel participates in some child exploration or child exploitation recovery activities. And rescuing children from some activities. So we're going to get into it. But before we get into his life story and what led you into that, why don't you speak sort of in summation for the listeners, what y'all currently are doing in Costa Rica?
Right now, what we do there in Costa Rica is we rescue children from sexual exploitation and other evilness that comes from human trafficking. Right now, we have 115 children. We have rescued over 150, but the other children, we were able to send them back with their family to where they were kidnapped and different things in other countries. More than 300 people has been arrested. So right now what we are doing is trying to rescue more children, but at the same time, sustain and raise those children that we have rescued ages from 0 until 18.
So we were talking before we began recording how the Marks of a Man podcast is trying to review and discuss characteristics that how men behave, how godly men behave, some characteristics of how Jesus commanded us to behave. And one thing I want to tell you guys is I would not be promoting Daniel and his organization so aggressively if I did not believe that he demonstrated the characteristics that I want us to cover and review in your life, man. And he is directing a very significantly large family, and they do need support financially. So, man, like, it's legit. He's here in the States. They've got a large budget, so check it out. But let's get back to sort of at hand about 115 children are currently in your care, in your charge. Do you want to tell the listeners a little bit about why? You don't have to give them the exact amount of your operational budgets, but you were telling me at breakfast this morning with our family why it takes so many staff members to serve all these children.
Well, one of the things you got to understand is that in order to be legal and have an institution that takes care of children, you got to cover the different positions that is required by law. Okay. But at the same time, one of the things that has to be clear is that the trauma these children come with after being sexually exploited from a very, very early age leaves so many damages, emotional, psychological, that reflects through their behavior that needs to be addressed with professional people, of course, and caretakers 24/7 that makes the operation to be extended, when it comes to collaborators with us.
Okay. And you were telling me like there's so many caregivers that have to work so many shifts. Break that down just a little bit for the listeners. Why does it take a staff of 80 to handle 115 children?
We have 115 children right now, and legally, you need one adult or caretakers, we could say, for every 5 children, right? So that's number one. Number two is that legally, these adults cannot work more than 8 hours per day. After they work more than 8 hours, you got to pay, extra hours, of course. So legally is 8 hours per day. So in order to cover them the 24 hours, you need 3 adults. But these 3 adults cannot work the 7 days of the week. They need to have legally 1 day off. So you need to hire another person that will cover their day off. So you need per month, for the whole time, 4 adults for every 5 children.
Gotcha. Yeah. So again, this interview is a little bit of like we're trying to get to the need first, and then we're going to sort of go back and begin to unpack the life story and the story behind of how God moved Daniel into this capacity, right? One thing that we did talk about before we began the recording was that this is currently a message of hope, and that this is something that you are believing that God has called you to do, has you to do, has your family to do. Man, do you want to talk a little bit about how communicating God's love is not as Sunday school and churchy and religious as what may be, and like the difficulty of trying to translate how God of the universe and God the creator into 115 of these individuals that are currently in your family?
Well, one of the things you got to understand is that these children, whenever they started to be sexually prepared, not only abused, but trained, prepared, groomed, and everything, they lose the comprehension of the objective world, we could say in general. What do I mean with that? God, the concept of God, the concept of love, the concept of being well, fear, all those things is completely different for these children.
Yeah.
Sleeping at night, for some of us, for some people in general, will just be another exercise you do, after the day, and you go, you're tired. You may have some stress, we could say, that doesn't let you sleep. But for these children, sleeping is a challenge because when they close their eyes, they go through everything back again. That's where they internally suffer even more.
Yeah.
Right? So the whole concept of God, the whole concept of hope, the whole concept of showing these children's love is a completely different exercise, we could say, because it's not by words. It's actually by action. These children needs to see what love is, because as soon as you say to them, love, immediately they will think, who's going to rape me next?
Yeah.
So for them to understand the concept of love, hope, purpose, God, and protection, even that protection has to come through an exercise of demonstrating as the adults of what God's love and how God's hope actually looks like.
Yeah, and how that actually is demonstrated. For the listeners that we haven't quite covered it yet, currently the 115 members of his family are broken into 3 different divisions or 3 different houses. They have a house specifically for underage girls, underage boys, and minor teenage mothers that actually have children of their own. Is that correct?
Yes.
So do you want to speak just briefly, like the 3 groupings of your family members and why y'all choose to have 3 different divisions amongst your family?
We started with the concept or the idea, the calling, we could say, was to have, beginning with girls under 12. And why? Why girls under 12? First of all, because where we come from, there's so much going on in that range of age that nobody's doing anything. Until a couple of years ago, not even the law will cover the crime done to children under 12. So because there was nothing for them specifically, we decided to target that age first. And when we say under 12, it's not that when they turn 13, they will go. No. It's like we rescue them before they turn 12 and bring them with us. And before they turn 18, that will give us enough time to work in their life. Because again, trauma, a lot of things, and especially academics, right? They often are so behind academically because of their trauma and because of absolutely everything. And if you want for them to be functional in the future, academic is a big part. But they cannot learn unless they overcome some of the traumas. Because these traumas becomes blockage in their learning process.
You were telling me earlier too that as a part of your staff, you have specific medical doctors, you have specific psychologists, correct?
Yes.
And like the need of to not retrain, it was maybe an inappropriate word, but to support these individuals in their recovery and redemption is part of, you said academically, but it's also like mentally. Is that accurate?
Well, we use the word restoration.
Restoration, okay?
For all of us, when we were unseen in sin and God saves us, starts the process of restoration of who we are and under the purpose of who God built us to be, right? These children is in the same way.
Yeah.
These children were created by God with a purpose to which through all what happened to them, we're actually taken away from that purpose. So we rescue them, bring them with us, and through the restoration of their life, emotionally, physically, mentally, academically, is to bring them back to the purpose of why God created them, right? And academically is a big part of that, of course. Now, they don't leave when they are 18.
Okay.
They stay with us for a number of reasons there. One of them is actually safety, because it's a whole legal process they have to go through. But at the same time, even here in America or in different places, as soon as children under children's home, foster home, or whatever turns 18, they are on their own now. I'm not sure if you've seen the world outside. You are 18, you may have the best education in the world and still yet not being prepared for the world at the age of 18. And what makes us think that these children who has been conditioned, programmed through the whole life will be ready to go into the world on their own. So this restoration process takes a little longer than that. So when they turn 18, what do? We celebrate. And then what happened next? You go to college, you go to trade school, you do something. When do we finish? We could say in a way, once they have a degree, they get a full-time job. They work in this job for 3 months so they can save some money.
Okay.
And then pay an apartment or whatever so they can now be independent.
Gotcha.
Not out of a program, just as our own children, just being independent. And they can come and visit us and work with us and whatever they want to do, but as a functional, independent individual.
Gotcha. Yeah, and so again, just to sort of hit it again, that we're trying to make an attempt to rescue young boys and young girls that are a part of sexual activity,
Yes.
sexually abused, sexually trafficked, and these young people are being extracted or rescued. Do you want to speak before we back up and get into your life story? What got you into this again? As I'm saying, do you want to speak a little bit more factually about where the current status of Costa Rica is and why these evil maybe exists and how it is continually allowed to go on and why we can't stop it?
Well, Costa Rica is a very touristic country, as many others in the region, right? And people comes to Costa Rica for various activity, beach, volcano, and whatever you're looking for. And sadly, cartels has found that you can, as I heard it once, you can sell drugs and you sell that once and it's gone. But a child, you can sell a child for 10 times per day if you want. And it doesn't lose its value, right? So because of that, you have a lot of money in the sexual exploitation of children. For a reason that I would say because of the depravity of men, because of sin in the heart of people, because of just being, sick, in a way talking. Adult, grown men, but also women. It's not only males, also females.
Yep.
Find some sort of pleasure in being with children. And when I say children, I'm not talking about 15, 16, 17-year-old girls or boys, because it's not only girls.
Correct.
It's average ages of 8 years old. And they find pleasure on this. So sadly, Costa Rica has become a hub, we could say, for the children's sexual exploitation for many people around the world to come and have this encounter with them as a part of their tourist package.
Yeah.
Is it legal? No, of course it's not legal. But sadly, in Costa Rica, there was not enough strong laws that were actually condemn or persecute, not only the perpetrator, the person who comes and rape, but also the facilitator, who always, not always, but most of the time is their own mother. There's often not a father, Okay, so there's a mother who maybe the mother was a prostitute, okay, or is a prostitute, and now is putting their children to do the same thing, not only girls, but also boys. How do we finish this? I think we finish it by not giving up. I think a lot of people, and I personally know a lot of people who had the great intention to start helping and they want to do something, and I believe them. But after their own self satisfaction, I'm sorry for my English,
You're good.
of self-conscious, tells them that they already did their part.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's something that I just want to take a minute right quick. No one's going to know this, but off the record, we were speaking. Daniel's a man of integrity and character. He's not going to broach it, but I'll broach it. He's here in the States to raise money because an individual, an entity promised to do something and hasn't fulfilled their commitment. And as you're talking about how we continue to fight against this evil is, one, you maintain your commitment. And if you give a partnership, you give your word to support somebody financially, that's a critical thing for you to continue to do, is maintain your commitment. And I think that's something that I'd like to sort of call out and affirm in you, is that, one, I respect you for not disclosing publicly, and quite honestly, not disclosing privately who that individual was and who that entity was. It didn't even matter to you. Your trust was in God to continue to move forward, but you didn't even waste time gossiping, slandering, speaking negatively, acknowledging who that person was, because it's not beneficial. And I think that's something that I want to call out and affirm to you publicly. I also want to tell our listeners that's the kind of behavior that is manly. And if you get tied up in the weeds on wasting time and effort and words on something that's not productive, you're losing sight of the more important mission, man. You know, and it's like, why would I waste time talking about, I need to go ahead and trust God to tell the mission, which is why you're here and being podcasted and interviewed. And we're trying to make an attempt to promote, reach out. Here's a couple things I've said. We've already given you the website, lastdoor.org.
The Last Door.
TheLastDoor.org.
Yep.
Right? You can go there. You can connect with us. We'll put you in touch with Daniel. I think that if you have a burden to do something, sort of what you were cautioning us for do is consider. I can't remember the exact scripture where it says in the scriptures that essentially if you want to be a builder, you should pause, consider the cost, consider what it's going to take to complete the construction process, and then go ahead and see if the resources are there. There is a certain degree of walking by faith. We were talking about that before we began the recording, that I think is applicable and it is required. Were you quoting James 2:18? Is that what you were saying?
Yep.
Go ahead and tell the listeners what that verse says.
In my own words, James 2:18 says, "Show me your faith without your works, and I will show you my faith by my works."
Yeah, man. So you're demonstrating your faith in God in this ministry, but it sure would be nice for those individuals or entities that have made commitments
That would be awesome.
to support you, in that. So that's why I'm trying to implore, like, man, we'll get behind them. So, like, look, let's sort of get back to the current status. It's not just Costa Rica, unfortunately. No. There's other places that children are being exploited for sex. There's an aspect that we're going to talk a little bit about. Hey, sort of disclaimer. You want to have a younger person that may not want to hear this next part, but there is the harvesting of organs and the evils that is currently going on that we're going to talk a little bit about. My experience has not been that here in the States, but I will say that unfortunately there are things that exist here in the States as well. And I don't want to focus on primarily our problems. I want to focus the conversation about Costa Rica, but we were both talking about how both our legal systems in our countries need some change and need some improvements. And if any of the listeners may be interested, okay, how can this continue to go on? Why is it permitted lawfully? And you mentioned that some of it is or is not lawful, but you also mentioned, we were having lunch, about why is it not a crime or why is it a crime? Speak to the listener a little bit about that, please.
Well, one of the things that we got to understand is that often we are frustrated about why is something not being stopped, or a crime or criminal is not being stopped. Why isn't the jail, not in the jail, right? One of the things that we got to understand is that, sadly, for our frustration is that a crime is not considered to be a crime because how incorrect the action is. For us as a regular citizen, we can tell what action is actually incorrect or not correct or unacceptable, right? But for a crime to be considered to be a crime, must to follow under a legal category to be called a crime, right? So there is a law that calls that action a crime. Now, if there is not a law that calls that action a crime, sadly, it's not a crime. And when it comes to court, when it comes to all the legal process, if there is not a law that will call that action a crime, so sadly, it's not a crime. Let me give you an example. In my country, where we come from, there was not a law that will consider or that will specifically say that for children under 12, or actually was under 15, sexual exploitation was a crime. And logically, we'll think, well, there's no need for a law to say specifically that. And in fact, there is, meaning that there wasn't a specific law that says that sexual exploitation was acknowledged as a crime for those above 15. If you have a specific law that targets for those who are above 15, leaves those under unprotected.
Yeah.
So what was the crime for those under 15? The crime was neglecting parenting. And what is the penalty for neglecting parenting? Well, just a couple, how do you say this?
Slap on the wrist.
And that's it, right? Now, after we actually came to the court, not the court, but to the Congress, and we actually give a good battle there and propose a better, exercise of the law and propose new laws, praise God, it was accepted 2 years ago, unanimous, that the sexual exploitation crime was going to be acknowledged all the way from 0 to 18 or 17 and 11 months, as what it is legal, to just simply follow under the category of child sexual exploitation.
And the crime of trafficking or selling a child against their will for sexual, for monetary gain, basically, is what's happening. Correct? I mean,
Yes.
that's what's happening here. Is these individual children are being forced to engage in sexual activities against their will, and they're being sold to a consumer.
Yes.
For sexual activities.
Sexual activities or others that are, some of those not as bad, some others much worse than that. And as you were saying, also under the law, I don't know every state here in America, but I know for sure there are a few states that I personally have knowledge that there is not law to penalize the person who sells another person, okay? In today's world, of course, for these kind of activities, especially when they are immigrants.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's not a specific law for that, okay, or human trafficking in general.
Is that something that you were referencing here in the United States of America, or as well as in Costa Rica?
Costa Rica to begin with.
Yeah. And I think that's something that we were talking off the record. I'm going to bring up here on the recording itself is, unfortunately, the consumer of these awful atrocities is sometimes individuals that come into your country on vacation visas, a temporary status, and they come in, and if they commit these activities in the country, tell the listener a little bit about, unfortunately, your experience of how that has been when you have a foreigner there that's got temporary access in a country and these things happen.
Part of that was that in our country, because of the tourism, right, because of our country needs people to come and spend their money in activities and different things there, the laws against criminal activity for tourists was much, much softer, right? What do I mean softer? You go to another country, and even though genital prostitution with adult women is not legal, there's not a penalty for an adult male to go and be with an adult female prostitute, right?
Okay.
Or you say consuming some, I would say, minor drugs, You go to another country, you consume some minor drugs. There's not a penalty like such, for that. Why? Because they don't want to scare tourism away. But that also affected when it comes to sexual exploitation. It's not the same, completely not the same. The exercise to come and be with a grown woman, and even though I'm not saying that's acceptable,
Right.
I'm just saying under the circumstance there, or consume minor drugs or whatever things like that, then to be with a child who is 6, 7, or 8 year old, that's a whole different world.
Yeah.
Okay.
But currently, you were talking to me earlier that they just simply get deported,
That's it.
and that there's no accountability for this atrocity that has occurred.
And that's part of the problem, because they don't want to scare the tourism away. This person penalty will be to be deported and not to return in 10 years.
Yeah. And you were telling me earlier that you went to your Congress in Costa Rica, but is there a crossover where you've reported back to the states and or the federal government of the United States of America about trying to hold some of these individuals accountable with interagencies? Do you want to speak about that, or do you want to pass on that?
I think I can just mention a little bit on supervise that and not giving details because of sensitive, information on that. But the answer is yes.
Okay.
The answer is yes. We have worked together with federal agencies here in America that will send some of their people to come there and identify these criminals.
Yep.
And once they are back into the country here, they will be persecuted and put in jail.
Okay, understood. So let's sort of move on. So unfortunately, a lot of these negative things, these atrocities have occurred. I want to sort of continue to try to encourage the listener and continue to try to ask you to communicate how God is giving these individuals a message of hope and restoration in the midst. I don't want to spend too much time centering on the negative activities.
Yeah.
I want to spend some more time about unpackaging how, but it is difficult, and there is a tremendous amount of work for you and your staff to encourage these individuals through their process. Walk the listener through a little bit of a scenario of what it might look like, of the difficulty of having one of your family members grow up in the restoration process.
Well, I'm so glad you asked that, because here's the thing. When we talk about hope, right, in the back of our mind, we can understand the concept. We can understand, what is hope. You ask people, do you have hope? And people will say, yes, I have hope. Or no, I don't have hope, right? But then when you ask, explain me what hope is. Maybe not everybody understand hope in the same way. Hope for some people is a good feeling. Hope for some people is heaven. Hope for some people is even, that with God, everything is going to be okay. But in reality, when you just come and try to shred a little bit what hope is, especially for a child, you can understand what is hope, okay? And Hebrews says that hope is actually that one thing that you don't see.
That's right.
Right? What is that one thing that you don't see? It's not talking necessarily about God or faith, right? It's talking about your future. It's talking about what is that to come. Mm-hmm. For these children, they don't have a future. They don't. See, I was talking with one of our boys once, and I say, he was 9 years old, 10. And I say, what would you like to be when you grow up? And he says, I don't know. I never thought about that. So you go like, how will you never think about what do you want to be when you grow up? Because, everybody does, right? Yeah. You're a child, you want to be a firefighter, you want to be an astronaut, you never, or even Spider-Man, right? But you want to be something, right? He says, I never had the time to think about that. That's not hope. That's a hopeless life.
Yeah.
When you start giving them the concept of, yes, tomorrow is going to be a good day with challenges, but you are able to, with God, you are able to overcome that. And even, here's the thing. You may fail tomorrow. Who cares?
Yeah.
Just get up, shake it off.
Yeah.
Let's move on.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And the best part of all this, if I could say best, is listen, you know what? after all what you have come through, if life have not destroyed you so far, you're already a champion.
Yeah.
They're not victims. They're champion, actually. They have survived. Things will not just take you down just like that.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to make it humanistic. You know what I mean? I mean,
do.
like,
I understand what
with
you're saying.
God, you know, just get up, move on, right? So one of the things when they first come with us, I say, you know, do you know when do you guys have to leave? And children all often will say, yeah, when we turn 18. And we say, nope. Oh, I guess that whenever I do something wrong, you will just kick me out of here, right? We say, nope. You will never leave. You know why? Why, they say. This is not an orphanage. This is not a refuge. This is not a children's home. This is a family.
Yeah, right on.
This is a God's given family. And you might be in a different location, but you still are family.
Yeah, man.
So because of that, and we use a number just to be funny there, you know, with children, say, you know, when you're going to leave? When you are 99 years old. And they laugh with a tear in their eye, saying, I don't have to leave? Am I wanted here? I like this. And that's where hope starts, is when they see that you know, the invisible, that they can't see that. But also they know that the one behind the whole thing there is God.
Yeah.
God is the responsible for safety and for everything with, you know, with them. So one day we rescued this girl, and she was 11. And I asked, when we brought her to the house, I told her, you know why you're here? And she say, why? I say, because God loves you. Well, she was not prepared for that yet. Because of that, she say, if God loves me, where was him before?
Yep.
Now, you know what? For her, she's right. At her age, after what she have go through, after she begged God so many times to rescue her, and the day never came to the point where she didn't ask God anything else. She lost hope. And then one day she hears God loves you. And then she say, I used to believe that until I didn't believe it anymore.
Yeah.
So where was him? She came through a process of seeing love, because we learned that day that before we share about God's love, we have to show God's love first. Then she started to see what love was, how much God loves her through the people. Because here's the thing. You do something wrong, and yes, doing things that you should not do always have consequences. But mercy and grace is always there.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that we spoil them in a way where they become misbehavior. No. There's always no discipline. But grace is always there. Grace and mercy. What is it? Get up, shake it off, try it again.
Right on. Hey, we're going to get into a little bit of Daniel's life. He had similar experiences where he was abused and sexually raped, and it had negative effects in his life. And he's going to share a little bit more about it as we unpack his life story. But I just wanted to bring that up because you obviously are sitting in this chair from a different perspective. As you were talking about hope, I was going to ask you if you wouldn't mind to consider speaking to perhaps a listener. Maybe there's a man that's been listening to this that has a similar experience in their life where they're pissed off, they're still harboring resentment, bitterness. Maybe God did not respond in a timely manner to their request. Maybe they didn't have hope. How would you encourage a listener that you've never met before, that has never heard your story yet, how they might listen to what you said about the young 11-year-old girl? Speak to them for a second, dude.
I have to say, based on my own personal relationship with God, right, which similar to many of us here has not always been the same, not the best, we could say. Some days are better than others, I would say, there because of our stubbornness. But one day I was with our kiddos, and one of our boys was actually misbehaving, right, having a little bit of a crisis. And I came and I was firm, and I told him, and I say, just stop it, calm down, right? He turns around And he says, Mr. Daniel, he yelled at me and says, Mr. Daniel, you will never understand what we have gone through. And I say, well, you know what? That is funny. Why is that funny? Because I personally was sexually abused since I was 7 years old until I was 10 years old. Now, you see, when they see me, especially my size, and they see me tough with beer, and all the things that I do and how I speak and when I rescue them and all that, they will never think that I was as vulnerable as them. They would never think that I was broken the same way they were broken. They would think that I'm just untouchable, and this warrior that never happened nothing, but at the same time don't understand us. I was 7 years old when I was raped, and I was raped all the way until I was 10 years old, and I became a very mad person, angry person, bitter person, who later in life, in a young life, I learned that hurting other people will also bring me pleasure.
Yeah.
So I was so hurting that I started to hurt others.
Yeah.
Until one day God saved me in a youth camp, right? And I decided to give my life to Christ through this the message of salvation, because the thing was that I was so broken and it was so heavy on me, and I was blaming so many people for the pain, for the sorrow, for the raping, and for so many things that I was literally tired of that, and that emotion of being tired would make me even more angry, and it was exhausting.
Yeah. I think that's where a lot of guys are, though, is like I was speaking to them, even if you're an adult listener, right? You've gone through similar experiences like Daniel or a lot of us have, and you mask them and you behave in a certain way that, in our opinion, in our assessment, is not how you should behave, not how Jesus has behaved, right? And that you do need God's help and assistance to overcome your experiences. And I think can continue to give us restoration. And what I was alluding to a little bit was that a restoration process may look a little bit different for
absolutely.
each dude, each man in their life, But what I was trying to sort of draw out for our conversation was to encourage us to deal with it, to sort of face that, right? If you continue to silence it and set it down quietly, it's still there.
Yeah, of course.
It's still new.
But here's the thing, I was so hurting that the lifestyle that I decided to live under a lot of violence, a lot of hurting other people, even as a hitman, okay? Yeah. That's all the way that I got into, and I hurt a lot of people, was the reflection of the fear of never, ever again somebody's going to hurt me.
Yeah.
You see, when I was a child, I was raped, I was vulnerable, I was, as a man, maybe the lowest point where you can even follow, right? As a teenager and growing as a teenager, my thought was I would never let that happen again, and I will have people to fear me. Fear me. Until I was saved. But when this child told me that, right, I say, funny thing, because I do understand. And when I told these children that I understood what they have gone through, I finally understood. It's part of the reason why God brought me to this. And the thing was that, no, God was not happy, neither he made it happen for me to be raped, okay? But he knew that in his hands, my pain could become somebody else's healing. So after that child say that, I went to the back of the property and I look up to God and I say, I get it. I finally understand this. And because I understand, here's one of the difficult part. Because I understood and I was able to tell these children that I understand them. Now they don't see me only the guy who rescued them, but also as one of them.
Yeah, that's right.
See, finally I was able to tell God, thank you for the pain that experience cost me, because now I can use that to help others.
Yeah, that's good, man. I do want us to drop back and begin to sort of cover your full life story and how you grew up in Argentina and so forth. But before we drop back and cover your full life story, do you want to talk to the listener any more about accurately currently the status of your organization and what you're doing? Do we feel like we've done a pretty good job of that, or would you like to expand on anything else before we move on?
Very quick before that, I just gotta say that because of what we have learned with our children and understand the needs they have no special need, but they have specific needs. Academic is part of that. So we have a girls program, we have our boys program, we have a teenage girls program with their babies, right? Okay. And we have a school also. We have our own school for our own children that specifically the teachers were trained on how to teach children with severe trauma, sexual traumas, okay? And they're learning, they're doing great. You have no idea how much they're learning, right? Our status right now in general is that there's so much more to do. We need to raise the funds that we need, in order to keep those that we have now. Yeah. But the goal is not just to keep them, but is to actually rescue more. Exactly.
Yeah, that's I know we've been talking about a message of hope and encouragement, but it's also a little bit of pragmatically, like there's more work to be done.
Absolutely.
And there's a need financially to cover what's needed currently. Yes. And there's an opportunity to go rescue additional ones. Unfortunately, so thelastdoor.org.
Yes.
All right. Do you have any kind of like social media presence at all? Do people find you, or should people just simply go to the website?
They can just go to the website and they'll find the different social media also there.
All right, cool. Let's take a small break and then we'll come back and cover his life story.